So, welcome, Joe, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very kindly for
Thank you for inviting us in.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
Okay, so I'm going to begin with a series of questions, and you can elaborate and answer them how you like. First of all, we'll start off with the basics. Where and when were you born?
I was born on Major Road, which is in a home that was opposite the first high school built here in December of 1916. And I remember when I was about 3 years old, I would be playing in the road because the road wasn't paved then and there weren't many cars. And when I was about, I would say about 4 years old, 3 to 4 years old, my father bought an acre of land on Highway 130, which is now George's Road.
Okay.
And we built a house there. And there, in that home, we had inside plumbing. And we had a central heating system, which was, those days, a little improvement over what we had.
That was advanced for the day.
And as a kid, I remember my sister and I were the last ones in the last load to go to the new home. And obviously we moved by horse and wagon those days.
Okay.
And as I said, Major Road wasn't paved, and I don't think Kingston Lane was even paved then. But I remember on the last load, my sister and I, my father, and the man driving a horse, and the pig were on the wagon. And that was, we were then went to the new home.
So that was the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And describe your family.
Well, as I look back over the years, at my stage in life, I have a lot of time to think and be thankful for what I've had and haven't had. But I'm very happy that I had a nice family. We were poor then, but everybody else was poor. And but we had a nice home, we had clean bed, always had something to eat. Don't ask me how my parents did it, but we always had something to eat. And in the summertime, my father was a laborer, but he'd come home from work and he would plant in the summertime 150 tomato plants and 75 pepper plants, carrots, beets. We had something to eat during the winter.
See, all those things were canned.
All my mother, I don't know how my mother did it. We were 6 children, 4 boys and 2 girls. And my mother washed on the washboard every Monday morning. And obviously, when canning season came, she canned tomatoes, canned pears, canned peaches. And there was a lot of work those days. And I never heard them complain once. Never. We did have, when we moved over to this other place, we did have maybe 12, 14, 15 chickens, and we would have eggs. And there were no cars those days. And we went to church, we walked to church. And
About how far was it?
well, we lived where Pierre's is now.
Okay.
My father built the house a little bit further down from that, and Pierre tore it down to expand his parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we used to have to walk to the Monmouth Junction St. Cecilia's, the old church, where it was approximately across from the municipal building.
Okay.
So we'd say it's close to a mile.
Yeah, it's a good walk.
And then I was about 4 years old, and I started school in Dayton. And I walked 8 years to Dayton School from there. There were no buses, there was no basketball, there was no football. The teacher took you outside and you did a little gymnastics.
Some calisthenics.
And then from the elementary school, the kids here in Monmouth Junction went to Princeton High. But over there on the 130 side, Dayton and Dean's, we went to New Brunswick High School.
Okay.
And that was a sad situation because those days, New Brunswick High School was the only school in the area. Franklin Township didn't have a high school. Holland Park didn't have a high school. East Brunswick didn't have a high school. East Brunswick didn't have a high school. South Brunswick didn't have a high school. Everybody went to New Brunswick.
And how long would that take you to get to New Brunswick High School?
Well, it didn't take long because the bus would pick us up.
Oh, you took a bus, okay.
And it would take maybe a half hour because on the bus that I was on, we cut down Dean's Lane, went through, came back out Davison's Mills, and pick up a lot of kids that way. But it was, at that particular time, New Brunswick High School was a good school, had a lot of curriculum. They were teaching German, they were teaching French, they were teaching everything. But I don't think I ever had lunch in the lunchroom once. Ate my lunch standing up in the hall. They had counters all around the hall. You stand up there and eat your lunch.
Huh. So you didn't have a sit-down lunch? You just...
No, it was just too crowded.
Okay.
But they had very good football teams because kids from all over the county.
Right, big pool.
Big in sports, yeah, did well.
Oh, that's great. Well, my next question is, where were your parents born, and why did they choose to come to South Brunswick?
Well, that's an interesting story. My mother came here at 18 years of age. My father came here when he was around 20 or so. He wound up out in Colorado working on a railroad. But he had 4 brothers, and they were all in the city. And they tried to figure out what he's doing out in Colorado. They got him back to the city. Well, he married my mother, and they lived on the Lower East Side. And there was this garbage strike in New York City. They say the garbage was packed 10 feet high. My father said, I can't live in this. So they came out to Monmouth Junction.
They came from the city, okay.
And we used to sit around the dinner table, and the families ate together those days. We had dinner every night, and we all sat in the same seat, and we all did the same thing. And sometimes after dinner we'd sit around and talk, and I always used to say to my mother, thank God Pop came to the country. Because I don't think I would have survived in New York.
This is a real countryside, even more so.
Well,
you can still see it. I mean, I see the fields out there, and it looks very rural.
If you want to expand on that a little bit, when I was a kid, there was nothing here but farms. In Dayton, you had Anderson, Bindy's, Hunkley's, the Duncans, the Farr Farm, the Charlie Cox, Charlie Richter, and in Monmouth Junction you had the Landises, you had the Flood, you had the Skanks, you had Bobco's, and the Landis, I mentioned Landis. There was nothing but farms. Everything, when I was a kid, was nothing but potatoes, corn, and wheat and rye. That's all. But it's changed a lot. I mean, you can tell it's not farms today. This farmland here is farmed because that land is owned by the research center, and they let a man from Hamilton Township farm it.
Okay.
Well, he knows what he's doing. He does a good job of it.
Okay.
But there's not much farm in South Brunswick anymore.
There's a
we
few.
used to have a couple dairy farms, and there were a lot of poultry farms that raised eggs.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And everything's gone.
Yeah, I heard about the poultry farms. The other question I had is, were your parents born in this country?
No, my parents both came from Italy.
They came from Italy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they came in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I've got a lot of, like I say, I've got a lot of notebooks and boxes around and mother's citizenship papers and all this sort of stuff. I'll never get to put it together in order, but I keep trying, you know?
Right.
But they both came from Europe, and we've got them registered in Ellisana,
At Ellis. Okay.
because they came through Ellisana.
Right. Right. Well, did you keep in touch, or did your parents keep in touch with the family back home in Italy?
Well, let me tell you something. My mother was a very educated woman. My father, he just got by. But my mother was a very educated woman. She went to a lot of schooling with the nuns in Italy. And she corresponded, but also, at that time, there were a lot of Italian people in Dean's Lane and some in Monmouth Junction. They couldn't read or write. They would get a letter from Italy, they would call my mother. My mother would go there, she'd read the letter to them, and she'd write back as to what they told her to write.
So she knew all the news.
Yeah. When the war was over, or during the war, my mother's mother passed away. And when we came back from service, us boys, we said to my mother, you want to go back to see what happened over there? Because she owned a home there. And she said, look, she says, America is my home. That's exactly what she said. America is my home. I got married here, I had my children here, you all went to service. I don't want to go back. And she didn't. It cost her $500 to give the house away. She went to the Italian consulate in Trenton, and they charged her $500 to give the house away. But she was very happy because she gave it to an orphanage.
She gave her the house back in Italy. She gave that away. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So I'm assuming that you spoke English and Italian in your house.
We all spoke a little Italian when my parents were alive. We managed to get by. You know, we weren't that fluent in it, but we could speak enough to. But my mother did well. My mother could read an English newspaper. She said to me, you got more education than me, why can't you read the Italian paper? I said, I don't know.
So did they tell any stories, or do you know any stories from the old country, from Italy?
Well, the only thing that I remember, she used to talk about Mount Vesuvius erupting a lot.
Really?
Yeah.
So she was right near the volcano?
Yeah.
Wow,
And,
that's interesting, that's dramatic.
yeah, and of course she used to talk about some of the conditions there, you know. But she had a sister and a brother, and they were both here. And why I say I've had a nice life is I knew all my uncles. I knew my father's brothers. I knew his children. It was really nice those days. It was family, you know. And we lived in the country, and they all used to come out and visit us.
That's great. So you were talking about your house that you grew up in. You mentioned that you had plumbing and you had electricity.
When my father built that other house.
And also, did you have so if you had electricity and plumbing and the heating, what was the heating in your house?
In those days, the central heating was a big air furnace in the center of the house, and you hope and prayed some of the heat got upstairs. It was an improvement over having just a kitchen stove,
right.
But it wasn't that great, you know.
So yours sounded a little bit more advanced, because I heard stories where the heat in the house is only supplied by the stove, like you were saying, and it was cold
that's
upstairs.
the way it was in the house where I was born.
Mm-hmm.
But over here they had they used to call them a hot air heater. That's all it was. You could burn coal in it, you know, and it would just throw up some heat. If you got 15 feet away from it,
it was cold.
Temperature was different.
Well, for example, did the children have their own rooms, or did they all sleep together? How did that work?
We were 4 boys,
Uh-huh.
and we had a bedroom. My 2 sisters had a bedroom, and my mother and father had a room. It was only a 3-bedroom house.
Okay. Okay, so you mentioned that you had a garden. You had all types of things growing up.
My father I had to give him a lot of credit. He kept us fed.
And you had chickens, and you had pigs, and any other.
Well, after that pig that we brought over was going, that was the end of the pigs.
It was just that one, huh? Okay. Did you have a favorite meal as a child when you were growing
Well,
up?
I gotta, it's a funny thing you asked that because this morning I was thinking, we were very big in fruits and vegetables, fish, obviously on Friday, but as long as we're on that subject, let me tell you how it was those days. The grocery man would come to your house, he'd take your order,
Really?
and 3 or 4 days later, he'd deliver your order. And it was, Emmons had a store, and I don't know what, and the butcher used to come to your house once a week.
Wow, that sounds better.
He used to come to your house with a truck, and he had ice in the truck, not dry ice, just plain ice. My mother used to buy some meat for a couple of days, and that was it. And
So you bought ice for the ice box from
yeah,
also Iceman?
Iceman used to come, the butcher used to come, the grocery man used to come.
Did you have a rag man here? The guy that would collect old rags?
Well, we had there was Mr. Cone from New Brunswick. He had bells on his truck, You sold him an old tire, you'd get a nickel.
I heard about those things. I heard people would come over to sharpen scissors too. Did you ever remember
Yeah,
something like that?
there used to be a man who would come around sharp scissors and knives.
Yeah, I heard those stories. Did you go on family vacations, or was that something?
You gotta be kidding me.
I figured that would. Well,
I'll tell you what my family vacation was. When I went to elementary school, all the kids around here during the summer months worked on the farms. And my vacation was picking potatoes, picking apples. Don't go and pick peas. It takes you half a day to pick a bushel of peas. And I have to tell you a story. There was you know where Summerfield is now, the houses on Summerfield in Dayton?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was Charlie Richter's farm. And that wasn't too far from where I lived.
Right.
And in the summertime, I worked there for 2 years, 2 summers. We started with potatoes, picking potatoes, and then he had an orchard and a cider mill. And I know how to make cider.
That's nice.
It was really interesting to work on the cider press. We'd pick apples and make cider maybe once, twice a week.
Wow.
And I have to tell you a little story. I think he used to turn it into Applejack.
Applejack? Yeah. I know Applejack was big around here.
Because he had a man who used to live on his farm and work for him. And I was only a kid, 10, 11 years old, 12 at most. And I would hear them talk about getting up 4 o'clock in the morning and covering it over with canvas and taking it off. So that's why I think I didn't know anything. They didn't tell me anything.
Distill, or what were they moving?
They were taking the cider in barrels
Oh, okay.
and delivered it somewhere at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, so that they would distill it, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, I heard about Applejack. The other question I have to segue in is, what role did religion play in your childhood and in your life?
I'm very faithful. When I was a kid, I was an altar boy. Later on, got a little older, somebody came along and asked me to be an usher, and I helped out. I was an usher. I passed the plate, ushered, and I lived in New Brunswick for 5 or 6 years, and being an altar boy was here at St. Cecilia's in the old church, but being an usher was in New Brunswick in that church. And there was a small mission church in Edison, St. Teresa's it was called. And after I ushered at St. Mary's, I would drive a priest to St. Teresa's to say Mass in Edison, a little church in Edison. And I did that for 4 or 5 years. I have no regrets. It's me, you know. I can't talk for anybody else, but it's me. I believe, but I have faith. You want to know the truth? I still pray.
Why not?
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed to say it. What
Sure.
is there?
No, I understand that. Well, can you tell us about some of your friends from the neighborhood back then? Anybody that stands out from the old days?
When I was a kid, there wasn't a heck of a lot to do around here.
Mm-hmm.
You either got a piece of stick and put a string on and go fishing, or play marbles. And I wasn't too good at either one of them. But anyhow, I mostly liked baseball.
Okay.
And from about the 7th, 8th grade on, that's what I more or less concentrated on, was baseball.
So baseball was your sport.
Yeah. And I can't say I was great at it, but I enjoyed it. And the school children that I went to school with, see, I lived down there by where Pierre's is, and there weren't a lot of houses around then. And mostly the friends that I would have would be from school.
Okay.
And most of those kids lived in Dayton, or they were brought in by bus from the outer districts.
So there weren't neighborhoods just
No,
like teeming with kids
there
because
wasn't.
everything was so spread apart.
No,
Okay, I see. So, I had on here a question about where your parents did their shopping for groceries, but you already explained that before.
Well,
but how about clothes? Where did you go to buy clothes?
Mostly New Brunswick.
New Brunswick, so you went up to,
Yeah.
that was the nearest,
Mostly New Brunswick.
for like department stores and
Yeah.
things like that.
Well, New Brunswick had nice stores in those days. It was really a nice town. Had good stores, quality jewelry stores, quality clothing stores. Years ago, they had a shirt shop,
Mm-hmm.
Jacob's Shirt Shop. I don't know if
It's good to take a break. So you had mentioned going to places like New Brunswick, because that was sort of the big city. What about Trenton, New York, or Philadelphia? Did you go to those places on the train, and how did you get there if you went to those places?
My parents would take me to New York occasionally to visit their relatives. That's the only reason.
They were still in like the Lower East Side or somewhere in the
No,
city?
no. By this time, they had mostly gotten into Brooklyn.
Okay.
And one of my uncles had a place up in New York State, up around Poughkeepsie,
Okay.
and he lived to be 103.
Wow.
One of my father's brothers.
Wow.
But the others were all in Brooklyn. Went to Brooklyn from New York.
So it's a little less crowded there and a little
Yeah.
nicer, I suppose.
Well, my father's brothers were all entrepreneurs. They all had the fruit and vegetable stores or a grocery store. I had Uncle Frank, Uncle Tony, Uncle Mike. I had 3 uncles that I could think of. Maybe there were 4, I don't know. But they all had fruit and vegetable stores.
So they had their own businesses.
Yeah, they had their own business.
So that helps.
They'd get up early in the morning, go to the market, put the stuff on display and get rid of it.
Sell their wares. Now, did your family have a car? And when did they get one?
I have an older brother,
Mm-hmm.
had an older brother. And I remember he bought the first Model A Ford, I think it was 1932.
And of course it was black, right?
Yeah, it was black, yeah. And he was very good to us. He was. Then we started riding to church. We used to walk to church. But when he got that car, we would all go pile in and go to church on Sunday with the car. And once in a while, he'd take us maybe to Kingston or somewhere for a little
Sunday drive.
Yeah. And he would really help my mother a lot too, for shopping and things like that. That was the first vehicle we owned. You know.
What was your first car and what kind was
Oh, don't talk about my first car. My first car was a Model A Ford Coupe for $25.
it? $25. It ran, right?
Oh my God! Yeah, it ran, but I only had it for maybe a year, and then I got a nice Chevrolet Coupe with spare tires on the side. Each
Oh yeah, I've seen those. You had running boards on it?
It
was
had
it-
running
yeah.
boards, and there was like a well on each side of the fender, and had a spare tire on each side of the fender, and across the back it had a luggage rack where you could pull it down, put your luggage on.
Yeah, I've seen
It was
those.
a nice Chevy, but I run that for quite a while.
What year do you think that was? The model of the car, approximately.
That Chevy?
Yeah.
I would have to say with either a 32 or a 34.
So it was the early 30s. Yeah, that sounds right with the styling
Yeah.
I hadn't mentioned. That's great about the cars. Well, I mean, Monmouth Junction is known because of the railroad. Did the railroad play a central part in your life? And
Well, the biggest part that the railroad played in my life
Uh-huh.
was I had a Plymouth when I went in service, and I had it in the garage for about a year or so, and then I thought, well, I don't know what this is going to be worth when I get back, so I sold it. But that was the biggest mistake I made, because when I got out of service, there were no cars. You couldn't go and buy a car
oh, right, because
because the companies are all making tanks and guns and
they
things.
switched over, they retooled.
So, I got to tell you a little story in order to get to this railroad station. I was discharged from the service on December the 27th. I got married on December the 28th. And I came out and lived in Monmouth Junction with my wife and her mother. And they lived one block from the train station. And there was no cars those days. You want to get to work, you got to ride a train. So I rode the train for a couple of years till I finally got a car. And unfortunately today there's no station there, there's no
Right.
train stop, there's no nothing. But those days, Monmouth Junction had a train station, Plainsboro had a train station,
Okay.
Dean's had a train station, Adams had a train station. The train used to stop for it all the way.
Was there a trolley line around here?
Yes.
Yeah.
I went to New Brunswick on the trolley with my mother once. I may have ridden it twice, but I remember once particularly. You know where well, I don't know, you don't live in this area, but there's high tension wires run through Dayton, high tension towers.
Yeah.
And those high tension towers is where the trolley tracks was. It came from Trenton, went to New Brunswick to Newark. And that trolley, it came through Dayton. From Dayton, we went into Davison's Mills and into Milltown. And then from Milltown, the tracks go into New Brunswick. Going through North Brunswick and in New Brunswick. And I remember riding that a couple of times.
Yeah, I heard about the trolley line. So what would be the difference between the train and the trolley, other than the size of the train, the frequency, how often it came through?
Well, the train was not only the frequency but the location.
Okay.
You take people in Monmouth Junction, they're not going to go to Dayton to get the trolley, see? And the train station in Monmouth Junction was a very interesting station. Did you ever get a picture of that, Seal?
I just got just for the postcard. I know you had those wonderful photographs.
Yeah, I'm gonna. I've been trying to make a copy of that for you. And I'll eventually get to. Excuse me a minute.
Sure. Okay, so this is Monmouth Junction. Did you have an idea what the date is on this?
Well, this existed when I came back from service.
Okay.
So this, I got to tell you the truth. Somewhere in this house, there's dates that would tell you all about this station, because my wife was very interested in history. And her grandfather was the station master here for $28 a month. And she had a letter around here somewhere where the superintendent from New York sent a letter giving him a $3 raise. But anyhow, this was the main line here. And in back of it is the tracks that go to Jamesburg and to the shore.
Okay, they went to the eastern, so they went in the eastern direction.
Yeah, and people coming out of Philadelphia would want to go to the shore. They'd get off here and go on this track here to go that direction. This here was the freight yard. And I guess, I don't know which one is her great-grandfather, but anyhow, that's some of the clowns in the area at that time.
That's a great picture, though. Do you want to sit this? Okay.
I'll just set it right here for now.
Well, can you tell me about your first job? As a teenager. I mean, outside of the
Well, I
working with
gotta tell you,
the family.
I'll tell you my first job. I started when I was at the lower end of the higher end of the elementary school. I caddied at Forest Gates Country Club, $1 for 18 holes. That's when I was still in school.
Okay.
And at one time, there were 3 Greyhound bus stations in South Brunswick. One on Lincoln Highway 27,
Okay.
one on Highway 1, and one here in Dayton. Well, the one in Dayton was by the, I don't know if you know where the bank is, South Amboy Bank is on the corner there by the shopping center, right across the street from that.
Okay.
There's a family living there now. But there used to be a Greyhound bus stop. And I think I might have been in either the latter 8th grade or 9th or 10th grade starting high school. I used to work there every day after school. And Saturdays and Sundays I was making $15 a week. That was a lot of money then. They were nice people, they were good people. But from there, prior to that is when I was working at the golf course, caddying 18 holes for $1.
But the other job, you made a decent wage.
Oh, I gotta tell you something. $15 a week was big money then.
Yeah, even it sounds good.
And I gave half of it to my mother.
That's what I was going to ask you. Where did it go? Half went to your mom.
Half went to my mom and half went. Well, when I went to school, I always had a quarter in my pocket. Hershey bars were 5 cents then. Ice cream cone was a nickel.
So you were doing all right.
Yeah, well, you know, you had to have. I couldn't expect my parents to give me to spend money.
Right.
I never looked for it that way. I mean, I think today a lot of kids are getting spend money, but we didn't know spend money for us those days. And that's why during the summer months, kids were all going work in the farms. But I'll always remember when I went to high school, I always had a quarter in my pocket. Always had something.
Yeah, especially during those times, because
Yeah.
that was a good place to be. Now, you mentioned that baseball was your sport, but what kind of social activities and like girlfriends and things like that when you were a teenager here?
Well, I gotta tell you something. I was a slow learner. I didn't bother with girls until I was somewhere in high school,
Mm-hmm.
But you raise a very interesting subject for me because I was playing baseball once here in Monmouth Junction, and there was a person off to the side watching the ball game who was nicely dressed, nice appearance, and appealed to me. And I knew some kids in Monmouth Junction, some boys, so I asked the guy that I knew, I said, who is that? He said, well, she lives right next to me. And I found out who she was, I guess about, had to be 3 or 4 months later, I had the nerve to go to her house and meet her. And talk about different activities. You know, I never drank and I never smoked. But those days, ballroom dancing was a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Big thing. And the Dayton PTA used to have dances maybe once or twice a month. I think maybe once a month to start off with. And they would call the dance, card party and dance. Well, the elderly people would come in and play cards. Well, the young guys would go in, dance. And that's really what I enjoyed mostly, was ballroom dancing.
Okay.
And I eventually got next to this girl I met at the ball game.
Okay.
And as time went on, little by little, I got a little closer to her. And we did do a lot of ballroom dancing. We used to go to Heightstown had a country club. And every Friday night, they had a nice big band there from Trenton. We'd go to dancing. And then later on, when I was working and had a few bucks, we would go to Point Pleasant or Asbury Park. They were always dancing in Asbury Park and Point Pleasant those days. And that was my outlet, dancing. I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I didn't run around. I liked to dance.
And who was this girl that you had met, that you had got to know? Can you tell me more about that?
Well, that's the one I married the day I got out of service.
The next day, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I had that in here. The question I was going to ask you was, I read that you first saw your wife at a baseball game in 1935.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that true? Can you tell us about it?
Yeah.
So we covered that base.
Yeah.
Can you now? Can you tell us about your wife and what she was like? I mean, I know she was involved in a lot of things that happened.
I was a very, very fortunate man. Very fortunate man. I had a nice family, father, mother, sisters and brothers who were close. And I was very, very fortunate to have married a beautiful girl. I'm not talking about her looks. I'm talking about her character, her personality, her patience. I was a very, very lucky man. I was a lucky man for her to put up with me. And she did. She was a beautiful person. And you know, she's been gone 6 years.
Yeah.
And there isn't a day that I don't think of her. There isn't a day that I don't get up or go to bed that I don't think of her. And I have one regret. And the regret is I'm sorry that I didn't help her more in the kitchen. Because she worked so hard. She was so good to everybody she came in contact with. And she did so much, and she was so kind. And as I say, I was a very fortunate man.
And how many years were you married? How many years did you have?
Only 62.
62.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. I would have taken another 10.
Yeah, you would have been in for another 10. Well, can you tell me where she worked and what she did?
She started out as an elementary school teacher. And she taught in South Brunswick, and then she taught at Rutgers Prep, and then they wanted her back to South Brunswick, so she came back to South Brunswick. And I remember distinctly when I went to her, she graduated her master's at Rutgers. I went to her graduation, and after that I took her to dinner, and then eventually she became elementary supervisor.
Okay.
And she gave 30-some years to education. And she enjoyed it, she liked it, she worked hard. I never interfered, you know, she She did what she wanted, how she wanted. But I don't know how she did what she did, because she taught school. We raised 2 kids. We enjoyed 4 grandchildren, but she never complained. I remember a few years back, she would be sitting in that chair, and I'd say, Ruth, I don't know how you did all the things you did. She says, I don't know how I did it either, but I'd be glad to do it all over again. So that's the kind of person she was. She was just, I was a very fortunate man to have such a nice wife.
Yeah, she had a long, you said 30-some years in the schools, right?
Yeah, she taught 30-some years. Her mother was a principal. She had another 35, 40 years in the school system.
Okay. So,
My daughter's a teacher.
okay.
My son-in-law was business administrator in the school district.
So it's in the blood there.
Well, it's...
Now, you had mentioned when you first got married that you lived with your mother-in-law for a while, right?
Yeah, we lived down, well, her grandfather built that house. Ruth's grandfather built that home. And it's on the corner there where you would go down to the old station. And, well, she was an only child. My wife was an only child. Where am I going? She's not going to leave her mother. I never demanded anything of Ruth, that, you know, you got to do this, you got to do that. No, do what you want, you know. And we lived there, and they used to have somebody cut the grass, you know. And, well, here I am. What am I going to do? Have somebody cut the grass? I start cutting the grass.
Right.
There was a big hedge around it because it was a corner property. I used to cut the hedge. It'd take me half a day or more to do it.
A corner property's tougher.
Yeah,
More.
but finally I managed to buy an electric clipper, and it wasn't so bad. But you know, I'm not much of a mechanic, but I know how to handle the pliers and the screwdriver and the hammer.
So you went from there, and did you come directly to your house here, or how did that work? Did you have this?
We lived there 45, 55. We lived there about 15 years.
Okay.
15 years. And I had a lot in Highland Park because I was working for Dupont in New Brunswick at the time. I thought maybe someday I'd get it there, but I'm not a city guy, you know. You're born out here in the woods, and I enjoy it. So I sold a lot in Highland Park and bought this. And we had it maybe, I don't know, 3-4 years. Finally.
Did you have it built, or
I was the general contractor.
Okay. All right. So you oversaw everything. And
Yeah, I hired the carpenters, I hired the masons, I hired the plumbers. I went to an architect. I gotta show you something. Well, maybe I shouldn't get up again. But anyhow, I worked in the research lab, and one afternoon I left my office, went to the library. I just wanted a little break. And I was opening up a magazine, and I saw this house.
you
And
saw
I
the plans for this house.
No, it wasn't the plans. It was just the exterior of the house.
Okay.
And I brought it home and I showed it to Ruth. She said, yeah, that is nice. So we took the picture, and she did a lot of work. She deserves a lot of credit. She took a floor plan and she designed this house interiorly.
Wow.
And then we took it to the architect and let him put it together. But Ruth did a tremendous amount of work on this project. But I was more or less responsible for the actual construction. And we had a very, very nice builder. And he wasn't the lowest bidder. So I was driving to Princeton one day, and I met him on the road, and I stopped, talked to him. And I said, Jody, I said, look, you're not the lowest bidder, but why don't you look at those plans again and come back? Well, he did. He dropped his price maybe $3,000-4,000.
Okay.
But he still wasn't the lowest bidder. I said, Jody, you're not the lowest bidder yet, but you're going to get the job. Because I wanted him to build it, and I never regretted it. He was a real gentleman. He and Ruth worked well, you know. We wanted something changed, he changed it, no problem. In fact, we had a 2-car garage here. So one evening, Ruth and I drove up, and I drove into one of the bays.
Mm-hmm.
The foundation was up, that's all, just the foundation. I said to Ruth, I said, you know, we put 2 cars in here, where are you going to put the garbage cans? So we decided we'd put 3. You know, we want another bay. He said, I got the footing all in. I said, you're going to have to tear some of it out. And he did it. He tore out one end of the footing and extended it and put up 3-car garage.
I'll have to take a look. So that was the house, and you know, you got, it's sort of like almost customized. You had your...
Oh, it's a custom home.
Yeah, it's a custom home.
Yeah.
And so you had your own builder, and you oversaw everything. But what was it like? Tell me about your children. You had mentioned that some of them went into education, and it's just out of curiosity, how are their names picked of your children? Tell me a little bit about your kids.
You want to know how they're picked?
Yeah. She picked them out, yeah? Was there any special reason for it, or an ancestor, or a family?
Well, my daughter, Ruth's grandmother was Laura.
Okay, so it was a family.
So that one there. But Carl, she just liked the name Carl. I have a daughter and a son. She just named like the name Carl and called the boy Carl.
Okay, she just liked it. So it was great to raise children here in the township, I take it.
Well, to me, my roots go so deep in this township. How can I say anything against it?
Right.
It was good. You know, I participated in Little League when my son was playing ball and stuff like that, and I participated in the Athletic Association. And my daughter was very close to my wife, to her mother. And I have no complaints really about life in general.
And your how was it like to be a grandparent? And how many grandchildren do you have?
We have 4 grandchildren.
4 grandchildren.
Yeah,
okay.
my daughter has 2, and my son has 2. And my wife was elated to be a grandmother, you know.
It's a nice time.
It's nice. And it really is fascinating to be able to be near them. Some grandparents were in Texas or Alabama or some other place, but it was very interesting for us. And I think it's good for them too, because I've done a lot of things. I don't want to brag, but I've done some things that the kids will enjoy.
Yeah,
I've got 4 plastic folders with a little bit of history of this family for each one of my grandchildren. And when I go, they're going to get it. So they'll know a little bit about South Brunswick, where we came from.
Yeah, well, they'll be proud. It's a legacy, you know?
Yeah, well.
We're back with Joe Spataro, and we're going to talk about the military life and during World War II. So you served in the military. Where did you serve?
Well, let me tell you the beginning of it. I was working for Dupont at the time, and large corporations could go to the draft board and get some people exempted that they wanted to keep. And I just happened to be one that was being deferred because of the work process. But I had 2 brothers in service, and I was on vacation one time. It was 1942, I think. And I went to New York and enlisted in the Seabees. The Seabees was a new organization under the Navy that was organized maybe 6-7 months. And I thought I would survive in the Seabees. So I went in New York and enlisted. Came back and told my supervisor. He said, "What's the matter?" He said, "We had you deferred." I said, "Well, I felt I had to go." So that was around July. In September, I was sworn in Newark, New Jersey. We went by train to Virginia. Got in there about 11 o'clock at night. And it was a brand new camp, nothing but mud. And I had boot camp there in Virginia. And after about 6-7 months, they had formed a battalion, because you need 1,000 or 1,100 men. We were 1,100 men that formed the battalion, and then we were transferred up to Providence, Rhode Island. There's a Quonset Air Base up there. We were next to the Quonset Air Base. And we had some advanced training there, and we had to attend the rifle range there and different things. And when I first got up there, I was pulled out of the battalion and assigned to ship's company, because they wanted somebody with my rating in ship's company. Well, I served on ship's company for 3 or 4 months, and then I had heard that the battalion was going to go overseas. And I took the position that if I'm going overseas, I want to go overseas with somebody I know. So I asked to be transferred back into the battalion, and it was approved. So I'm back in the battalion. Well, within about 30 days, we're on a troop train headed for California. Well, we knew by the type of weapons that we were issued, where we were headed. So we went out to California, and I thought, well, this is going to be nice. I'm going to see Hollywood and this and that. And that. Well, within 30 days, we were on a troop train. No, 30 days we were aboard ship with a convoy of 11 ships. We were headed for the Pacific. And we only stayed there about 28, 30 days. So we got out there, and let's see. Well, we started at Pearl Harbor. That's where we started. And we were there for about 3 or 4 months. We shifted over to another part of the island. And I was in an operation. I was, as I say, I was lucky. I wound up in the headquarters company. But I had responsibilities with people in the hospital, people in the brigs, and people shipping out. Because we used to go, there was a fella, I had a friend who was from the state of Iowa, and I used to have duty until 3 o'clock, but then I was transferred to duty from 4 to midnight. And around 6, 7 o'clock, we used to take a ride down to the docks and see the Marines loading in the LSTs with the equipment, and the Marines shipping out. We used to say to ourselves, how many of them are going to come back?
Right.
It was a sad situation. But I enlisted because I didn't want to be at the mercy of something else. I wanted
You can choose.
what I thought I would do. And I never regretted it. It wasn't easy, but as long as you had to do it, you try to do what you like and try to do what you fit in. And I thought that I would fit in that type of an operation. And it's an interesting story coming back. Coming back, we got aboard a ship finally. Had to wait about 2-3 weeks for transportation because everybody was coming back. The war was over and everybody's coming back, no transportation. But after about 2-3 weeks, we got aboard an admiral's flagship. We were coming home. Well, we were out to sea about 2 or 3 days. We're sitting at the tail end of the ship. We see the thing turn around like this. We're going back to San Diego. The ship was headed for Virginia for ship repairs. Well, they decided that the ship repairs would take place in Bremerton, Washington. So we returned back to San Diego, and the ship went up to Bremerton, Washington for repairs. Well, then we sat there and we waited for a train. Well, trains were busy, taking everybody else home. We waited about close to a month.
Really?
Yep, for a train.
So you just waited there at the...
Yeah, well, we were at the base.
You waited at the base and you had to just wait for
I
transportation?
had to wait for transportation. We had nothing to do all day long, but.
Well, I bet you really wanted to go home. It must have been.
Well, it was in December. Listen to the story.
Oh, this is the, okay.
This is
I
in
see where we're
December.
going.
And we finally get aboard a troop train. And it took us about 6-7 days to get home. Because we got out to around Kansas. They put us in the stockyard. We waited there for an engine. And we waited a half a day to get another engine to keep pulling us along. Finally, on December the 24th, pulled into Lido Beach, Long Island at 11 o'clock at night on December the 24th. They took our ID cards from us, said to go home and come back on the 26th. Here we are, no identification or nothing, but we came home for Christmas.
Oh, okay.
But I was home for Christmas, that Christmas, but I went back on December the 26th. Went back to the station. On the 27th, they had all the paperwork done. While we were home for Christmas, the yeomen were working. We had all the paperwork was done. They called us in a big auditorium, gave us our discharge. And they gave me $3 and some cents for car fare to come home. And that was the 27th. And then the 28th, Ruth and I got married.
And that's when you got married, right? So everything happened
Yeah,
right away.
yeah.
After you waited all that time, you had to wait a whole month or so, right?
I'll be honest with you. I said to her, I wouldn't marry now because how do I know how I'm coming back?
Right.
I wouldn't do that. So I was about 28, 29 years old then. There wasn't no more chicken.
Hey, Randy, I think this is going to be out
That one's,
in a few seconds. So.
okay, we can pause it and I can pop in the other tape. It's okay time to pause.
Yeah.
I think you can.
Say when, Brett.
All right.
Ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, we're on to the next part. Political life. How did you get involved in local township organizations to begin with?
Well, my first experience was the first aid squad. I lived down in the town.
Mm-hmm.
The siren used to blow and nobody would move. And finally I says to my wife, maybe I ought to join the first aid squad. That was my first experience and my first contribution, I'll say, to the community. And I was with the squad for 21 years. And for about 18 or 19 of those years, I served as treasurer. And that was good because I was getting a little older. I wasn't too anxious to get out of bed and run. But I'll never forget one call in particular. It was on a Christmas morning. Siren was blowing and nobody was getting out. I managed to go with a gentleman by the name of Bill Voorhees.
Mm-hmm.
And this was shortly after the war. There were still GIs living around town.
Okay.
And these kids lived in Little Rocky Hill. I don't want to say a shack, but almost a shack. And a woman had a miscarriage. So we picked her up, took her to the hospital. When I last looked at her, she was in a nice, clean, warm bed. It makes you feel good. But after that, mostly I served as first aid treasurer.
And that was Christmas that you mentioned that story happened on Christmas Day.
That was a Christmas morning. Christmas morning. I guess everybody was up late. Nobody wanted to bother answering the call.
And what was your first elected position, you said?
Well,
Did you mention that?
yeah. Let me clarify that a little bit.
Okay.
I never seeked any office. I was elected 3 or 4 times. I never said to somebody, I'd like to run.
Mm-hmm.
I stayed home and mind my own business. Well, one night, 2 members from the council and the tax collector came to my home. And they said, Joe, you should run for office. You've been here all your life. You know a lot of people. You know this, you know that. what do I know about running government? I used to go to meetings and listen to see what was going on when I came home, because I was interested in what my government was doing with my tax dollar, but I never thought I'd run. They stayed here till 11 o'clock at night. We sat on the back porch. I said, well, you gotta let me think about it. So I spoke with my wife, we were talking, kicking it around, and I figured, what I got to lose? The only thing I could do is lose the election. But I gotta tell you something. If you keep your nose clean, and if you're good to people, politics is a nice experience. It's an experience. You meet a lot of nice people, and you meet some that are a pain. But that's life, and it helps you mature, it helps you in other ways. And I enjoyed it for one reason. I didn't seek it. And I remember the second time I ran, the township chairman of the campaign and stuff, he says, Joe, he said, you're running for office, you should go out and solicit funds. I said, I didn't ask you to run. You need money, go get it. I'm not begging on anybody's door. That's me, see? And they knew where I stood.
So your first term as mayor, you took over for Richard Elnicki, right?
Dr. Elnicki was a professor at Rutgers.
Right.
And he was going to the state of Washington, I believe, as an intern or something to teach out there for sabbatical. I think that's the term, sabbatical.
Right.
And I was elected to be the mayor. Well, I guess I surprised everybody. I did a fair job. And then when I had to run the second time, those days, the mayor wasn't elected. He was selected by the rest of the committee.
Okay.
And I ran the second time I was elected, the committee voted me mayor again. Well, I did the best I could. I'm born and raised here. I was interested in this town, did the best I could for the people. I wasn't in politics for me. I had a job. I was earning a living.
It wasn't a stepping stone.
It wasn't a stepping stone for me.
Okay.
The same thing happened with the surrogate. I'm sitting here on a Friday night. My wife and I were watching TV. We got a phone call come in. Joe, aren't you coming down and screening for the surrogate candidate? I didn't even know they were having a screening. How am I going to go down there? But they knew me. I didn't know them. They knew me.
So you got the call.
So I got the call. And I said, look, I haven't thought about it, but if they said, the person that called said, we're going to be here till 10 o'clock. So if you're going to come in, come down. I said, look, if I'm going to come in to screen, I'll be there by 10 minutes to 10, quarter of. Sat here and talked to Ruth. And I never bothered with county politics. I didn't know anybody. I didn't care. Because I didn't have any aspirations for further office, see. So I said to Ruth, I said, well, maybe I'll go down and see who these cast of characters are. I didn't know anybody down there. So I took a shower, got dressed, had no resume, didn't have a thing. Just went, here I am. So I go into this room and there's a U-shaped table. And all the delegates from the different districts of the county, all the municipalities are represented on that board. So I sat in there on a chair and I said, look, I gave my name, where I lived, what I did, where I came from. I'm a veteran, I'm working for so-and-so, and this and that, and the other. And then I told them a little bit about my background here. They knew all about my background here. There was a guy by the name of Colonel Bradley. He was involved with the ROTC at Rutgers. And he was in politics in Milltown. He lived in Milltown, but he was in the Army, and he was in ROTC. He knew all about me. I don't know how, but he knew all about me. That's where it started.
They wanted you.
Yeah. So I went down there and I, sat there and just told them what the story was. And about 2 weeks later, we were having a Township Committee meeting. And the police station was at the same building where the township met. So a policeman came in and said, "There's a phone call for you." So I left the meeting, went and got the phone call, and the woman said, "You've been selected candidate for surrogate." Well, I said, "Thank you." I hung up, went back to me. What do I know? But then I was contacted again, told when we would have meetings to get together. And it was a very interesting experience. I met an awful lot of people in the county. It's an office where I met an awful lot of attorneys. It's an office where I dealt with the judges. And most of all, you dealt with people who had a problem. It was a very nice experience. I can't say I didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed it very much. And it's a funny thing. Middlesex County's been Democratic for 200 years.
Mm-hmm.
That year that I was elected surrogate, 2 freeholder Republicans were elected with me. I've got articles in the paper downstairs in the file. I was the highest vote getter in the county that year. But anyhow, the terms for the Republican freeholders expired and they were gone. My term was for 5 years. I was the only Republican in the Democrat building.
It was lonely, huh?
No, I gotta tell you something. I never asked for anything, never did anything except what I was expected of my responsibility. Because the surrogate, the sheriff, and the clerk are constitutional officers. They don't have to abide by the freeholders. But they treated me very, very well. If they gave the sheriff and the clerk a raise, they gave me a raise. I never had any problem with them. And one freeholder, I'll never forget, he was the freehold director. He said to me, he said, "Joe," he said, "you're one of the best surrogates we've ever had." And he said, "You know what I like about you?" He said, "You never asked for anything." And I never asked for anything. I just did what I was responsible for.
So you kind of came into these things organically, I guess. It just that you fell into these positions. But my next question here was, you stayed active in township events throughout the years, and my question is, what makes you stay involved? Well, it seems like you never really got out of it. You stayed involved with the communities and with the people, and that's why you're still involved.
Some people steal. Some people try to do good. I like to think I've always tried to do good. And the satisfaction that I've had over the years is that I've helped some people. Back in the 80s, I got a guy a job. This guy was from Lebanon. He went to France and married a French girl, wound up in the United States. But he knew a little bit about computers, and he knew a little bit about accounting. And I got him a job. I saw him about, I'd say maybe 15, 18 months ago. And I said, "Well, how's the family?" Because I knew he had a son and a daughter. He says, "Joe," he said, "you changed my life." Well, I didn't do anything to change anybody's life. I just did something with an opportunity at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "My daughter's a doctor." He said, "My son has a master's degree in physical science, physical therapy." The guy became a success. He appreciated what the exposure he's had.
So, so you've had all these experiences in the township over the years, but what would you say your proudest accomplishments are? Or do you have
I'm
anything?
glad you asked me that question. I got in the back of the house. An article was done by the Home News, and I was asked that same question.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you the same answer.
Okay.
Marry my wife.
That's your proudest accomplishment.
That's my proudest accomplishment, marrying my wife. She was a beautiful person. I tell you.
That's a great answer.
Well, that's it. All these other things You just do to survive, and the opportunity comes, and you do the best you can at whatever it is.
Well, what are the biggest changes you've seen in the township over the years, other than, I mean, obviously there's been a lot more development, but what would you say is the biggest change?
Well, because of the increase in population, obviously we've had to do things differently. The schools are different. We would never have had a library. The churches have grown. It breaks my heart not to see the cows and the chickens around anymore, but they're gone. What can I tell you?
Right.
At heart, I'm basically a country boy at heart. Ruth and I used to go to the city. We would go to Radio City Music Hall at Easter and Christmas time, beautiful shows. We would go occasionally to see a Broadway show. We've seen many of them, but it was always nice to come home to the country, you know. And the progress that I've seen is based basically on the population, because the population is demanding of certain things. But I'm very fortunate. I'm looking at a cornfield.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you something. It's not going to be there too long.
No,
'Cause
probably not.
somebody that runs a hedge fund bought that property.
Oh, that very piece of property.
And they've already knocked on the door. They want to put up townhouses.
Okay.
Oh,
I don't want townhouses across the street. I want to look at the corn.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
But that's the example of the changes. And I remember in the 50s when Kendall Park first came in, us old-timers, I say old-timers, obviously we were fighting it. We didn't want Kendall Park. But, and it took me 10, 15 years to accept Kendall Park. But, you know, it's changed. We couldn't stay the way we were. If we could, it'd be an entirely different township.
Right.
But how do you stop progress?
Especially with the proximity to New York City and
Yeah.
even Philly.
You know, I'll tell you something. Seal, hand me that. No. I don't think it's in that, but hand me that, Lou.
This right here?
Yeah. I really dug them out. I don't know exactly where they are. When I was on the planning board, I was always very skeptical of the applicant, because in my thinking, the applicant only has one thing in mind. How much money am I going to make on this project? He doesn't care about South Brunswick, he doesn't care about the people, and he doesn't care about the conditions that he leaves. He's interested in how much he's going to make on this project. Now, there was a developer that came in, I got the article here somewhere, I dug it out purposely to show it to you. This applicant came in the first night. They sat down. They weren't sitting down 5 minutes. They said, we're going to put a swimming pool in for the municipality. We're going to build a daycare center for the municipality. And I opposed it. And I said, we won't see this daycare till the year 2000. Well, you know what? It's 2012. We still don't see that daycare on Friendship Road. So, you know, that's the way I was serving. I served for the welfare of the community.
Yeah, well, the developers they're businessmen. You know,
They're business.
and they're not going to stay in the community, like you said. So yeah, that's true. But what advice would you give to young people today? as someone who's been here for all these years?
Well, who the hell am I to give advice?
Uh,
But the best thing I could say is, you know, when I was in the Navy and I broke boot, Chief Petty Officer come out and talk to us. And he said, you know, you're going to get along in the Navy, you can do this, that, and then he says, keep your nose clean. Well, I was a kid, you know, what do you mean keep my nose clean? But I think the main thing is for the young people to have develop character, be loyal, be honest, and you'll manage to get by. That's the way I live my life.
no. That's great.
That's the way I've lived my life.
Great ideals.
I was very fortunate to have the upbringing that I did, the family that I did, and I was very fortunate. I think, I always say, I gave my two children the best mother they could have had.
That's great. And how would you like to be remembered in the future?
The only thing I'd like to be remembered is Joe was an honest guy. And I think I have been.
Honesty, integrity,
Yeah.
character.
Yeah. And I'll tell you why. You know, I never took politics too seriously. Some people take it awfully seriously. I got along with Democrats and Republicans. If the Democrats in power, you gotta deal with them. I don't know why I'm a Republican. I'm not ashamed to say I'm a conservative individual. Well, when you grow up poor, how can you be anything but as conservative?
Well, this is all great. I just wanted to say, in conclusion, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and talk to us
Thank you
on behalf of the library.
Thank you for putting up with me.
No, it was great. It was
And,
really enjoyable. Thanks so much.